Audrey, when they close the road, they put up big signs, like this one. Ah!
Remember when family vacation meant 8 hours in a station wagon with no air conditioning, your sister's elbows in your ribs, and your dad insisting he didn't need to stop for directions? In 1983, John Hughes and Harold Ramis turned that experience into National Lampoon's Vacation. Chevy Chase played Clark Griswold, a man who believed he could force his family to have fun through sheer willpower. Beverly D'Angelo played Ellen, his wife, who knew better but went along anyway. Anthony Michael Hall and Dana Barron were the kids, stuck in the back seat for the whole ride. The movie was a hit. It made over $61 million, spawned 4 sequels, and somehow made a pea green station wagon memorable. But the story behind the camera had its own share of wrong turns, including an ending that died in test screenings, a car designed to be hideous on purpose, and a scene the director spent years regretting. Today, we're covering 15 weird and wonderful facts about National Lampoon's Vacation. Now, before we dive in, subscribe and share this with anyone who's ever white-knuckled their way through a family road trip, and now that we've done that, let's get into the countdown with number 15. The movie started as a very dark family memory. This entire movie exists because John Hughes survived disastrous family road trips as a kid. Years later, he turned that trauma into a short story called Vacation 58. Published in National Lampoon magazine in September of 1979. It read like a fictionalized memoir. It was meaner, darker, and way more cynical than anything that ever made it to VHS. Hollywood came calling almost immediately, but the version on the page, that thing was grim. In Hughes' original story, Clark wasn't a lovable goofball, he was a man watching the post-war American dream fall apart in real time. Instead of Walley World, the Griswolds actually make it to Disneyland, only to find it closed for repairs, and that's when Clark completely loses it. He drives to a sporting goods store, buys a real handgun and live ammunition. I guess a strongly worded letter wasn't going to cut it this time. But he then uses a map to the stars' homes to track down Walt Disney's mansion in Beverly Hills. He hops the fence, confronts Walt Disney, and tells him, "You closed your fantasy park and that was a mistake," and then shoots him in the leg. Oh, and he also shoots Disney's security guard because at that point, why stop? And the story ends with Clark arrested for attempted murder, the family on a flight back to Chicago, and Clark sitting alone in a California jail. Ouch. That was John Hughes' version of a family vacation, and somehow Hollywood read that and said, yeah, we can work with this. Number 14, Clark Griswold almost looked a lot different. Before Chevy Chase climbed behind the wheel of the family truckster, the role of Clark Griswold was up for grabs, and depending on who you ask, a few big names were in the mix. Film trivia circles have long floated Bill Murray as an early consideration. The logic tracked. Murray and director Harold Ramis were creative partners, having already teamed up on Meatballs, Caddyshack, and Stripes. If Ramis was directing, Murray's name was usually in that conversation. But there was a complication. Murray and Chase had history, specifically a backstage brawl at Saturday Night Live in 1978. Now, by most accounts, they'd patched things up enough to coexist in Caddyshack, but the tension between them was still well known around Hollywood. Whether Murray was ever formally offered the role or just casually discussed, the part ultimately went to Chase, who was already a National Lampoon veteran from the National Lampoon Radio Hour and Lemmings. He was practically family at that point, but here's the part most people don't know. Clark Griswold wasn't Chevy's creation, he was Harold Ramis's. After Ramis passed away in 2014, Chase paid tribute to his old friend and admitted something fans had never heard before. Apparently, Ramis had acted out the entire character of Clark Griswold on set, and Chevy was basically doing an impression of Harold's impression. So, that overly determined, barely holding it together optimist we all know, that guy came from Ramis, and Chase just ran with it. It also explains why Clark worked so well. Ramis understood the character from the inside out. He knew Clark wasn't supposed to be a punchline. He was supposed to be a guy you recognized, your dad, your uncle, maybe even yourself, desperately trying to hold the whole thing together while everything fell apart around him. Ramis encouraged Chase to lean into that enthusiastic cluelessness instead of playing Clark as bitter or defeated, and that single choice changed everything. He wasn't just a guy having a bad vacation, he was a guy who would never stop trying, no matter how many times the universe told him to quit. Bill Murray might have made us laugh, but Chevy Chase channeling Harold Ramis made us believe in the delusion. Number 13, the Griswold kids kept changing faces. In 1983, Anthony Michael Hall was Rusty Griswold, all gangly teenage awkwardness and dry wit, perfectly capturing the misery of being dragged across the country by a dad who desperately needed a map and a reality check. But by the time the European Vacation rolled around in 1985, Hall had other plans. He'd already committed to weird science and wasn't about to hop back into the Griswold family station wagon, and that triggered the domino effect. Once Rusty was out, Dana Barron, the original Audrey, got replaced too. Director Amy Heckerling figured if one kid was changing, they might as well swap both. You couldn't have one familiar face and one stranger sitting in the backseat, it would look weird. So, they just started over. And then it happened again and again. By Vegas Vacation, the franchise finally stopped pretending. Chevy Chase looks at the fourth set of Griswold children and delivers the line fans had been waiting for.
If you guys are growing up so fast, I hardly recognize you anymore.
The joke lands and suddenly the revolving door of child actors became part of the bit. Even with all the swaps, Hall and Barron remain fan favorites. Hall played Rusty as the awkward kid, desperate to impress his dad. He even chugged an entire beer during a father-son bonding moment in the desert, an improvised bit that made it into the final cut. And then you had Barron's Audrey, which had a rebellious streak a mile wide, secretly stashing weed from cousin Vicky and rolling her eyes at everything her parents said. In the original, the Griswold kids actually felt like real kids, not just props for Clark to stumble over. Number 12, the movie poster was painted by a fantasy art legend. Take a good look at the original Vacation theatrical poster. Clark Griswold standing tall, Beverly D'Angelo and Christie Brinkley at his feet, his tennis racket raised to the sky like he just conquered something, triumphant, heroic, and completely unearned. That's because the studio hired Boris Vallejo, one of the most famous fantasy illustrators alive, to paint it. Vallejo had spent years painting covers for Savage Sword of Conan, Tarzan, and Doc Savage, muscled heroes, mythical creatures, and enough glistening flesh to make a Renaissance sculptor blush. If you've ever browsed a paperback rack in the late 70s or early 80s, you've definitely seen his work. You just might not have known it. Now, that heroic King of the Hill pose of the lone warrior standing tall, weapon raised, everyone else at his feet, that was the signature of Frank Frazetta, whose legendary Conan paintings basically invented the visual language of sword and sorcery art. Vallejo worked in that same world and knew the template inside and out. So when he got the Vacation commission, he did something brilliant. He took Frazetta's heroic fantasy blueprint, his own style, and the entire sword and sorcery genre, and turned it all into a joke. Same dramatic composition, same larger-than-life energy, except the barbarian warrior is a suburban dad and the mighty weapon is a tennis racket. It worked so well, the studio brought Vallejo back to paint the European Vacation poster too, where Chevy Chase somehow looks even more jacked than the first time around. Between barbarian kings and intergalactic warriors, Vallejo squeezed in Clark Griswold, and it might be the most memorable poster he ever painted. Number 12, Clark Griswold's nervous breakdown needed real creative tension to work. Now, behind the laughs of National Lampoon's Vacation was a collaboration that could have gone sideways. Harold Ramis, the SCTV alum who had just directed Caddyshack, signed on to direct. Chevy Chase, already a box office draw thanks to Foul Play and Caddyshack, took the lead this time.
You gotta get out of the hall.
I'm gonna show you places you can go.
Where are you gonna take me?
Yeah.
But unlike Caddyshack, where Chase was part of an ensemble with Bill Murray, Rodney Dangerfield, and Ted Knight, here he anchored the film, backed by Beverly D'Angelo as Ellen and a young Anthony Michael Hall as Rusty. The original script by John Hughes was told from Rusty's perspective, but Ramis and Chase reshaped it together, shifting the spotlight to Clark, the well-meaning dad unraveling in his quest to deliver the ultimate family vacation. That rewrite gave the film its center, Clark's spiraling optimism and perfectly calibrated suburban desperation. There was old drama lingering off screen, too. Chase had famously fought with Bill Murray backstage at SNL in 1978.
I went to host
Right.
in 1978 or something.
Okay.
Bill had been my replacement when I left.
Right.
And I didn't know him well, but I knew him.
Right.
Very funny.
Which extremely, yeah.
And a tough kid from Chicago who
Right.
probably thought I was from,
Harvard.
Yeah. Harvard, and had never had a fight.
Right.
And Ramis, of course, was close with Murray. But by the time Vacation began shooting in the summer of 1982, the feud had cooled. They'd patched things up enough to share the screen briefly on Caddyshack, and Ramis pushed Chase to lean into Clark's third act meltdown. Not just slapstick frustration, but full-on fraying at the seams. That push-pull between Ramis's class satire instincts and Chase's physical comedy sweet spot created that tone that made Vacation iconic. Scenes like the soggy sandwich lunch, Clark's solo desert wander, and the unhinged Walley world standoff, capped by John Candy's security guard cameo, work because of that creative fusion, not because either man won the movie.
Well, nobody notified this office of anything.
Ramis didn't return for the sequels, but Chase, alongside D'Angelo and a rotating cast of Rusties and Audreys, carried the franchise from there. That original tension, collaborative, not combative, is exactly why Clark Griswold became the lovable disaster we still can't stop watching implode. Number 11, the family Truckster was a rolling disaster by design. Clark Griswold's biggest nemesis wasn't the road, it was his car. Built from 1979 Ford LTD County Squire wagons, the Truckster was designed to lampoon every tacky styling choice of the era. 8 headlights for absolutely no reason, that sickly metallic pea green paint, wood paneling slapped everywhere, including places wood had no business being, and the crowning touch was a fake Wagon Queen hood emblem, a royal title for a rolling eyesore. The production built 5 Trucksters, each modified to reflect the car's mounting abuse. The pristine version for early scenes, battered versions for post-vandalism shots, and at least one reinforced for stunts. During the desert sequence, stunt coordinator Dick Zeiker bet the crew he could launch the Truckster more than 50 feet. He won. None of the original Trucksters survive today. They were either destroyed during filming or stripped back into original LTD wagons for other Warner Brothers productions. Replicas pop up at car shows all the time now though, but finding an original is virtually impossible. Every Gen X kid watching in 1983 recognized that car. Maybe not a Wagon Queen specifically, but a beat-up station wagon with sticky vinyl seats and a broken AC that Dad swore he'd fix next summer. Number 10, Christie Brinkley actually drove the Ferrari. Now, hands down, the coolest part of the Griswold road trip wasn't Clark at all. It was Christie Brinkley hitting the desert highways like she owned them. And here's the thing, she actually drove that car. For wide and medium shots, Brinkley handled the 1981 Ferrari 308 GTSI herself. Gated shifter, heavy clutch, the works. She maintained the perfect speed and just the right flirtatious distance from the Truckster take after take. Grace, under pressure while looking effortlessly gorgeous. Chevy Chase, meanwhile, our so-called dad in control, was being towed for most of his close-ups. The Truckster moved along at highway speed, sure, but only because a camera rig was pulling it. That freed Chase to focus on his reactions and eye contact with Brinkley rather than the road. Some of those intense flirtatious moments filmed on a soundstage using rear screen projection. Perfectly controlled lighting and timing that would have been impossible at 65 miles per hour in the desert. The whole thing works as accidental metaphor. Clark thinks he's in control of his destiny, but he's literally being pulled along by forces he can't manage. Brinkley is fast, free, and independent. Clark is lame, clunky, and tethered to a hideous green tank with his entire family in tow. Oh, and one more thing. Brinkley came back for Vegas Vacation in 1997. This time she was driving a Ferrari Mondial T with a baby in the back seat. The sight gag landed perfectly. A knowing wink to fans and a reminder of just how much time had passed since their first desert encounter. Number 9, Chase and Keach couldn't keep a straight face. Vacation was never afraid to get dark, and nothing proves that quite like Dinky, Aunt Edna's yappy, mean-spirited dog who meets his end tied to the rear bumper of the Truckster. You never actually see anything. Clark ties the leash to the bumper while packing up camp. The family drives off, a cop pulls them over, and when he holds up that empty leash with gritted teeth, your brain fills in the rest. John Hughes' original short story went much further. In the source material, you got the full grotesque aftermath. The film leaves all of that to your imagination, which somehow makes it worse. The gag came from urban legends about real road trip mishaps, and during production, the crew almost witnessed one firsthand. Harold Ramis told David Letterman in 1983 that while filming in Durango, Colorado, someone spotted a station wagon pulling out of a Holiday Inn with a dog still tied to the bumper. They saved that one. Chevy Chase and James Keach improvised most of their exchange, and both actors were visibly fighting back laughter the entire time. Keach's deadpan observation that the tough little mutt was probably pretty stiff by now landed so well because he barely kept a straight face delivering it. The Griswolds weren't evil, they were just beaten down, making terrible decisions one rest stop at a time. Number 8. Clark barely looked at the Grand Canyon. One of the 7 natural wonders of the world, 277 miles long, over 1 billion years of geological history carved into the earth, and Clark Griswold gave it about 2 seconds. The scene works because of what comes right before it. Clark has just robbed a hotel cash register after the clerk refused to cash his personal check. He's panicked, desperate, and running on fumes, so when Ellen asks if he wants to see the Grand Canyon, he glances at it, processes nothing, and hustles the family back to the car.
Okay, let's go, come on.
Check the box and keep it moving. They filmed at the actual Grand Canyon. No matte paintings, no studio trickery, it was the real thing in all its enormity, reduced to a 2-second pit stop. Alright, now we're halfway through the countdown, so drop a comment and tell us the most Griswold level disaster that ever happened on one of your family vacations. And hey, while you're down there, hit that like button and subscribe. We drop new nostalgia videos every single week. Now let's get back to the countdown with number 7. Aunt Edna's body was a nightmare to film.
She's not fine, Clark. She's dead.
Strapping a dead body to the roof of a station wagon is dark comedy, putting it lightly. Making it look convincing at highway speeds, however, that is a production headache. The prop team built a weighted mannequin to play the deceased Aunt Edna for the roof scenes. A standard dummy would have looked flimsy or blown around at 55 miles per hour, so they loaded it down for stability. The extra weight made the Truckster's already custom-built roof rack prone to shifting during filming, not ideal when you're trying to shoot a moving car in the desert. They originally filmed a shot where Aunt Edna's fingers move while she's strapped to the roof, suggesting she might still be alive. The ratings board deemed it too cruel to have a living person tied to a moving car, so the scene was cut. She had to be officially dead before going up there. For the porch scene where the Griswolds leave Edna's body in a lawn chair at her son's house, the crew used the same weighted mannequin with an internal armature to maintain that unsettling rigor mortis stiffness. The rain was artificial, and balancing the prop in the chair without it toppling mid-take was a constant struggle thanks to uneven weight distribution. But here's the dark footnote. Imogene Coca, who played Aunt Edna, was reportedly terrified of car travel in real life. In 1973, she was severely injured in a crash that cost her sight in one eye, split her leg open, and fractured her cheekbone and ankle. A decade later, she took a role where her character dies and gets strapped to the roof of a station wagon. Some irony writes itself. Number 6, Walley World was 2 different parks stitched together. Clark Griswold's dream destination was a movie magic trick using 2 completely different locations. The interior shots, everything inside the park, were filmed at Six Flags Magic Mountain in Valencia, California, but that iconic "sorry folks, park's closed" entrance? The sprawling empty parking lot where Clark finally snaps. That was Santa Anita Park, a thoroughbred racetrack in Arcadia. Production added a Walley World facade and Marty Moose signage to the racetrack's ticket booths to sell the illusion. The coasters were real though. The Screaming Mimi was actually Colossus, which opened in 1978 as the world's tallest and fastest wooden coaster. It closed in 2014 and was converted into the steel hybrid Twisted Colossus. The Whippersnapper, where Clark holds the security guard hostage, was Revolution, famous for being the first modern coaster to feature a 360-degree vertical loop, and it still operates today as the New Revolution. Walley World itself was a gentle parody of Disneyland. Roy Walley was modeled on Walt Disney, Marty Moose was obviously Mickey Mouse with antlers, and John Hughes originally set the story at Disneyland in his short story, but the film swapped in a fictional park to avoid legal trouble. The Griswolds drove 2,460 miles for a theme park that did not exist. Somehow, that makes Clark's breakdown even funnier. Number 5, the dog barks were a total accident. Lindsey Buckingham's Holiday Road is a masterclass in solo studio craftsmanship. Recorded while Fleetwood Mac was on hiatus following their Mirage tour. Buckingham intentionally distanced himself from the organic collaborative sound of Fleetwood Mac to embrace a more experimental approach. He discovered the Fairlight synthesizer and the Linn drum machine, and both of them opened up a whole new world for him. Rather than assembling a band, he recorded Holiday Road largely on his own using a home studio setup that gave him complete creative control. The Linn drum machine created the song's signature mechanical, driving boogie-woogie beat, and he played every note heard on the track, from the jangly rhythm guitars, the bass, the keyboards. For the glossy wall of sound in the chorus, Buckingham recorded numerous vocal passes, doubling and tripling his own voice to create artificial harmonies with surgical precision. And then there's the famous dog barks at the end. Buckingham added them simply because he felt the song needed something funny. He had no idea the film included a major subplot where the family dog is accidentally dragged behind the car. When Ramis and producer Maddie Simmons first heard the track, they were stunned by how accurately the song addressed the movie's subject matter. Despite its massive cultural footprint, the song was only a minor commercial hit at the time, peaking at number 82 on the Billboard Hot 100. Buckingham himself has called it a tuneful little thing, kind of camp and tongue-in-cheek, but with the spirit of rock and roll in it somewhere. That accidental synchronicity between the barks and Dinky's fate was pure coincidence, and somehow it made the whole thing land even harder. Number 4, the original ending was too dark to release. Now, we've already talked about how dark John Hughes' original story was, but even after Harold Ramis softened Clark for the screen, the first cut of the film still went a bit too far. In that version, after discovering Walley World is closed, Clark tracks down Roy Walley at his Beverly Hills estate, crashes the Truckster through the gate, and holds Walley and his business associates hostage. He forces them to sing and dance to Walley World theme songs, providing the family entertainment the only way Clark knows how at this point. The weapon was still the BB gun with the price tag dangling from it, same pathetic prop, just much darker context. And it got worse. After Roy Walley declines to press charges, the Griswolds board a plane home only to realize they're on the wrong flight. Test audiences sat in stunned silence. Harold Ramis later said they were hysterical for 75 minutes, and then they went strangely quiet and did not laugh again for the rest of the movie. The problem wasn't just that Clark seemed too mean-spirited, audiences felt cheated. They'd invested the entire movie getting to Walley World and never actually got inside. Hughes was called back to write a new ending. The revised version kept Clark's desperation but gave fans what they came for, the park itself. John Candy was cast as the security guard, the family finally got their rides, and the test scores went through the roof. The hostage concept wasn't wasted though. 6 years later, it resurfaced in Christmas Vacation when Cousin Eddie kidnaps Clark's boss and forces him to the Griswold home.
I have never been treated like this in my life.
I'm sorry, this is our family's first kidnapping.
Some ideas just need the right context. Number 3, the movie was raunchier than you remember. If you grew up watching Vacation on network TV, you saw the sanitized version. The theatrical cut earned an R rating, and the studio wanted it that way. Beverly D'Angelo later explained that after Animal House, Vacation was deliberately pitched as a raunchier comedy for young adults. The National Lampoon brand had a reputation to maintain. D'Angelo appears topless in the shower scene where Clark bursts in doing his psycho routine with a banana. She advocated for the nudity herself. She felt it was a more honest portrayal of a wife being startled by her husband. Christie Brinkley's pool scene is tamer. The production asked her to go nude at 3 a.m. She refused, and they settled on her tossing her bra at Chevy's face. The rest of the R comes from Clark's expletive-filled meltdown. Cousin Dale showing Rusty his stack of nudie magazines, Vicky handing Audrey joints from her shoebox of weed, and the pimp scene in East St. Louis. None of that made it to broadcast TV. Ellen buttons up a shirt instead of stepping out of the shower, Clark's rant gets dubbed over, and the weed subplot disappears entirely. So Gen X kids ended up with 2 different movies depending on which version aired, the Uncut Chaos or the Scrubbed Down Family Edition. A lot of people didn't know what they'd missed until the DVD came out. By Christmas Vacation, the franchise had shifted to PG-13 to chase that audience on purpose. Number 2, the Truckster shows up in another sitcom's opening credits. The opening titles for Married with Children featured aerial shots of Chicago highways during the first 3 seasons. That footage wasn't shot for the show, it was pulled directly from Vacation. If you look closely at those early intros, you can spot the Wagon Queen family Truckster cruising down the expressway. Same pea green paint job, same wood paneling, same car. Both productions used Chicago as their setting. Both were about dysfunctional families, and both were owned by studios happy to recycle footage when it saved money. By season 4, the highway shots were trimmed from the Married with Children opening entirely, just Buckingham Fountain and then straight to the logo. But for those first few years, the Griswolds were technically commuting through the Bundy's world every week. Number 1, Harold Ramis apologized for one scene. The sequence where Clark gets lost and asks a pimp for directions wasn't filmed in St. Louis, it was shot on the Warner Brothers backlot in Burbank. There's a minor geographic error in the film. The Griswolds cross the Poplar Street Bridge into Missouri, but a highway sign reads East St. Louis, which is in Illinois. Some TV versions edited the sign out to fix the continuity. In a 2004 interview with the Riverfront Times, Ramis, a Washington University grad who knew the area well, said he regretted making the scene at all. The intention had been to satirize Clark's suburban fear of the city. The scene was supposed to be about prejudice, and instead, it just was prejudiced. For decades, the city became shorthand in pop culture for dangerous urban area, a reputation cemented by a few minutes in a comedy filmed on a Hollywood backlot that wasn't even set there. And there you have it. 15 weird facts about National Lampoon's Vacation. Which fact surprised you the most, and which ones did we miss? Let us know in the comment section below, and if you enjoyed this video, hit that like button and subscribe. We drop new nostalgia deep dives every week. And until next time, this is Remember When.